And we are live. So, welcome to episode 143 of An American Werewolf in New Jersey. I am the American Werewolf. In the house tonight, we have a new guest, and we've been trying to put this together for a little bit, little starts and stumbles as life occurs. But it's all good because we have him here tonight. We have Mr. James Hancock. Who is the host of the Geeking Out? Is that correct, with James Hancock?
Yeah, Geekin with James Hancock. Yeah.
Okay, Geekin with James Hancock, which is a film review and series review channel. Like most of us out here. But I take my hat off to him because he's watched Rings of Power, so I wouldn't have to. So I'm very grateful for that. And it's like a debt you can't pay. Welcome to the show.
I'm happy to fall on that sword on everyone else's behalf. And initially my reviews of that show, I was like just kind of sad and depressed with the final product, but now it's just turned to bitterness and cynicism. And now I think people, even if they don't care one lick about Lord of the Rings, they'll just watch my video to watch me have a temper tantrum, like stomping my feet. And so I'm happy to have that temper tantrum for everybody else's viewing pleasure.
Yeah, between that and She-Hulk and, the usual, product that is released every 6 weeks or so, there's always cool channels if you don't want to watch the show like yours. Where you can just watch people rail about it. And I find that to be hysterical. That's a good time. That's a better use of an hour than watching the shitty show that you're talking about.
Yeah, I can't remember who pointed out recently, but a couple of weeks ago, I was watching somebody's channel that said the new entertainment that's more visceral and more exciting than a lot of these shows and movies is just watching the commentary. And obviously, you can't have a show devoted to commentary without content to comment upon, but it is bizarre about how there's so many outlets now where just their feedback and their analysis of the industry is far more riveting than the show in question. And that's a new thing. And I mean, obviously, like in the 90s, I would read people like Elvis Mitchell in the New York Times, but I was never looking forward to his review more than a particular movie by Scorsese or whomever. But this is where we find ourselves. And so I just try to appreciate the good stuff like House of the Dragon, where I just enjoy the hell out of it each one week after another. But man, it's there are a lot of reasons to be cynical and disappointed these days when it comes to film and television, at least when it comes to the maintenance of big franchises. And obviously we'll be talking about two big franchises this evening.
Yeah, it's slim pickings. But there was, just to touch on it for 30 seconds, House of the Dragon this week. I saw one of the mega channels describe it very well, and this guy Mahler, he said that this past episode may have been the best episode of anything he's seen all year. That was just breathtaking to watch, and I'm like, wow, HBO has just got such a winner on their hands. Congratulations to them, to have people that give a shit.
Yeah,
because that's all it takes
to be a totally emotionally invested, where you plan your calendar around it. And that's where House of the Dragon is. It's that good.
Yeah. Now, we are here tonight because it is the spooky season. And so we are here to talk about some content that dropped on Friday, one on Disney Plus, which is Marvel Studios' Werewolf by Night. And the second also dropped on Friday through Hulu, which is Hellraiser. Now, I am the first person, anybody who watches this show knows I am the first person to say there isn't a horse that a horror franchise a dead horse that they won't beat even further. But I was pleasantly surprised. I don't want to get into it yet, but though that's what we're talking about here tonight. We're here to talk about Werewolf by Night. We're here to talk about Hellraiser. If you're ready to go, shall we get it going?
Ready.
Boogie woogie. I primarily run a horror channel. So when I found out in 2022 that Marvel was going to start, digging into their dark stuff, Morbius, Doctor Strange was going to be directed by Sam Raimi. And so I saw somebody, I forget, about a year or two ago, somebody said, this is going to be Marvel, Multiverse of Madness is going to be the first Marvel horror film. Then I heard that they were going to be doing Werewolf by Night. I couldn't have been more amped. And then I saw them. And I was not so amped afterwards. I mean, you have a franchise with limitless resources and access to all the talent in the world. But I'm 53 years old. And as I always say, give me a story. Morbius, despite even having Matt Smith and Jared Harris there, didn't get it done. Doctor Strange, I thought was beautiful to watch. Beautiful. And I'm like, wow, this is what happens when you give Sam Raimi $250 million. I thought it had a story that was like an angry 18-year-old girl kind of wrote it. And I'm just like, what the hell? It didn't sink to me. The script did not sync with what I was viewing, which was just stunning between, the creature falling out and the eye coming, popping out at the end. I'm like, wow, that's not something you see in Marvel, or, the notes flying off the sheet music to fight each other, or the score, the corpse of Strange, fighting, at the end. And I'm like, wow, this is just, and even the small things you would see. It's just beautiful. Like if you turn the volume off, you would like, holy shit. I mean, but no, didn't happen. So this was the third one. Why don't you
and Blade on the way, Blade around the corner, if they can ever lock down a director. That production
that has been pushed back as of today.
Yeah.
That was canceled as of today. I think it's looking at 2024 now.
When they announced it a couple of years ago, I mean, Mahershala Ali's two-time Oscar winner, he was fired up, and I guess it was 2019 where they announced it. I'm like, all right, like, what's your rush?
No. Yeah. I think the Fantastic Four is still another 4 years away. Same with the Secret Wars movie. Mahershala, they have no script. They have to restart the script from scratch.
Well, if the script's a mess, I'm glad they're delaying it, because we don't need another mediocre Marvel production where it's a funny thing where Marvel from 2008 to 2019 just seemed to be getting bigger and better, and my fandom just kept increasing, especially that period from like Winter Soldier through Endgame, where you had like James Gunn and the Russo brothers and Taika Waititi and a couple of different directors in the mix who every once in a while would give us a good one. So even if we had the occasional turd blossom, I could ignore it because we knew the next one was probably going to be pretty good. But now we're in a weird space where, like, for the last couple of years, it's been more miss than hit. And every once in a while, I'll see something that kind of gets my juices flowing again. But it never would have occurred to me a couple of years ago that I would reach a state where I was skipping a lot of Marvel content. But here we are. I didn't watch a single episode of Miss Marvel. I watched one episode of Moon Knight. I didn't watch a single episode of She-Hulk. And I guess if you're not watching all the stuff, are you even still a Marvel fan? And I would say, well, I'm a Marvel fan from like 1979 when I opened my first Marvel comic, up through about 2016 when I stopped buying Marvel comics. So that's my Marvel fandom. So I'm still a very passionate Marvel fan, but now I guess I'm a I don't know, like a struggling alcoholic where I don't quite know if I want to open up the bottle again or not.
I would just put it. I would simply say I'm not a fan of shitty content.
Yeah.
And you're right. Everything from Iron Man all the way through to, I would say the high watermark was Infinity War. Endgame, it was a good movie. It wasn't a great movie, but I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, I think my peak in the theater on Broadway in 68 for Civil War in IMAX, giving high fives to total strangers during the battle at the airport when Ant-Man became Giant Man. I mean, just a room full of nerds screaming "fuck yeah" and giving each other high fives. That was a great Marvel experience. And yeah, those experiences are few and far between these days.
Well, what you've got is the oversaturation of product.
Yeah.
More is less. More has become certainly less. And I say this all the time, maximizing output, minimizing quality, because you've got to kick something new out every 6 weeks. My
Do you
understanding is like
blame the Disney Plus app? Like now that they've got that platform and they've got to feed the beast. For me, the reason Star Wars and Marvel, I mean, they've both have suffered dramatically in recent years, but I think one of the main drags on both those brands is this need to constantly feed the beast in order to grow subscribers, which leads to the dilution of both brands, in my opinion.
yeah, yeah. You've said it. You took the words right out of my mouth. It's just it's poor content. My understanding is that the visual effects teams for Marvel and Disney, Star Wars, and these sorts of they're exhausted.
Yeah,
And
sweatshops.
Yeah, it's kind of what it's become. And you can see the diminishing quality, in terms of the product when you watch it. But like, I got through WandaVision. I hated it. I didn't like the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I totally passed on Loki.
Yeah, I quit. I quit Loki and then I circled back around and eventually finished it, but I did not see it in the same way. I remember reviewing it the first episode or two, but then just realizing I hate this show and I'm tired of talking about it.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and then they did Hawkeye, where they butchered the high water. They butchered Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin. They turned him into Louis Anderson. The high water mark for Marvel in terms of television programming was what they had with Netflix.
Yeah, those early Daredevil seasons were real fucking fun. I enjoyed the hell out of those, and just the way they captured the Punisher and Kingpin, and that's a corner of the Marvel universe that I really enjoyed as a reader in the 80s, where it was just firing on all cylinders, and always loved the street level vigilantes and the way they would interact. That was just a really great era. But obviously, getting back to just your whole thing about Marvel and horror, since the 70s, Marvel has had their horror corner, and it's never been a dominant part, like Tomb of Dracula and Ghost Rider and Werewolf by Night. In the 70s, there was a major push to really go all in on horror, or Man-Thing, or whatever the case might be. And most of those characters I encountered around like 81. Like my first Werewolf by Night encounter was in the pages of Ghost Rider. My first encounter with Man-Thing was in the pages of X-Men. The second X-Men comic I ever owned, number 144, Man-Thing makes an appearance, and he scared the hell out of me as a little kid. So I do love that Marvel corner, and I love the horror genre. But I guess the question is going to be like, are they going to allow the filmmakers to go all in and really make it feel like the horror genre, or just Marvel with a fresh coat of paint?
Yes.
And so I guess we can debate to what extent they were successful with Werewolf by Night.
Yeah. To start, I had a resentment walking in because I hate horror comedies. And so the Jack Russell story, to the best of my recollection, is not a comedy. It's very much tragedy, of this man who, like every werewolf, is trying to sort out this issue. It's like a Banner Hulk thing, only bloodier. Here, we've got A-list casting. You've got Gael Garcia Bernal, A-list actor,
And he's been good doing stuff like, since I first saw him in Amores Perros back in like 2000 or 2001, whenever the hell that movie came out. He's a stud. And so, good casting.
Yeah, I remember him from the Motorcycle Diaries.
Yeah, or like Y tu mamá también and stuff like that. Anyway, I'm big fan.
So, I mean, it starts out, it's black and white. Ulysses Bloodstone is dead. They've already so you're not getting to see any, sort of backstory with Bloodstone. He's a major player in the Marvel horror universe. And so they've just got these nondescript sort of monster hunters that gather at this house. It reminded me, and I put this in my video because I did make a video for both of these over the weekend, of that X-Files, Postmodern Prometheus, where at the end of it, remember the one where they all go to a Cher concert at the end? It was like a spoof on Frankenstein. It was like a comedy. And then at the end, everybody ended up at a Cher concert. I'm like, what the fuck did I just watch? So it had that same sort of campy feel to it. What were your initial thoughts? I mean,
well, I was initially, I got kind of confused as to why going for like a third vibe for a bunch of 70s characters, because Man-Thing and Werewolf by Night and the original Bloodstone are all Marvel 70s. I was like, all right, well, I can appreciate the music, Universal Monsters and the Werewolf, et cetera, and so forth, like the Wolfman. But I would have preferred they leaned into a 70s vibe, since the 70s was the the peak era for Marvel and the horror genre. But I get if they're fans of the Wolfman and Lon Chaney Jr. and all that stuff, knock yourself out. But I would say, well, I wasn't even going to watch it, period, until you invited me to be on your show. That's how much my interest in Marvel has waned and declined. I was like, all right, well, I guess if I'm going to discuss it, I should go ahead and see it. And I would say that I enjoyed Elsa Bloodstone. I enjoyed Jack Russell. But the villains I thought were pretty one note and one dimensional. And obviously they're planning on just killing them all off in the context of that 1 hour format. So I guess I like how tight and economical the format was. And I enjoyed seeing Man-Thing on the screen. Although Man-Thing, part of his appeal is that he looks so gorgeous and green. And he actually beat Swamp Thing to market by a couple of months. The Man-Thing, I think he appeared like 2 months prior to Swamp Thing. So I don't know if there was like some corporate espionage going on where both Marvel and DC were racing to get their green monsters onto the spinner rack. But I thought it was strange having him be in a black and white movie. But they should have explained how like he who fears the Man-Thing burns. I can't remember the exact expression, but if you feel fear in his presence, you just
burns
ignite.
at the Man-Thing's touch.
Yeah, which I've always thought is like the coolest, eeriest power. And that's what really freaked me out when I was like 5 reading these comics when he first appeared. It's like, oh, all you have to, you just feel fear in his presence. You just ignite, which is totally badass.
And he just looks, the look is so creepy. He's got that trunk and like leaves and they look wet and he looks disgusting. Like him touching you would make you afraid, you know, like there'd be no way not to be afraid by something like that touching you, you know? And yeah, I mean, here, you know, just, I don't think that Marvel has the balls to go dark, or that Disney.
Yeah,
Disney just doesn't.
is a tough place to do anything that's going to at all alarm or disturb anybody. I think what their attitude is with the Disney Plus app, that anybody can turn it on and basically just play anything and everything on there and never have to worry for a second that a child's going to come into like the kitchen crying and screaming about something they just saw. And so it's pretty bland. It's pretty watered down. It's very family friendly. It's very risk averse. And I think perhaps we're just being wildly unrealistic to expect really cool, kick-ass, visceral movie experiences from the Disney Plus app. I actually just recently canceled my Disney Plus app. It's going to end at the end of this month. So luckily I didn't have to resubscribe in order to watch Werewolf by Night. But I finally realized, you know what? I'm not excited about anything on the Disney Plus app. I am going to review, do a mid-season review of Andor tomorrow, which I feel like it's one of the only things where they actually are trying to go for something vaguely resembling an adult sensibility, but it's still,
I heard that.
Yeah, it's still not totally satisfying, but they're at least trying to show you can do something different with the Star Wars genre. But yeah, I just right now, the bigger Disney Plus gets and the more successful they get, the less enthused I seem to be by any of their offerings. And so, yeah, but once again, Hulu, ESPN Plus, it's all part of Disney. So I'm a bit of a hypocrite because I do watch UFC, which is on ESPN Plus, and I watch Hellraiser, which is on Hulu. So it's all the same corporate overlord. So maybe I should get down from my high horse and stop taking such a stand about dropping my Disney Plus subscription.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, if you're just saying you're not interested, then you're not interested. I mean, you know, it's just I've avoided these shows like the plague, and I covered this specifically because it was a horror program, and I run a horror channel, and I grew up reading Werewolf by Night. You know, we were talking about with Power Records, you know, in those old you know, books. So I wanted to see. You know, the basic story is there's a monster loose on the ground. You've got these monster hunters, come back to that real quick, and they're kind of like Star Trek red shirts. Most of them don't even have names. And my understanding was that Mahershala Ali was supposed to make an appearance as Blade in this, but couldn't because of scheduling conflict. So I would have understood why you had Blade here at a monster hunters gathering. Okay, that makes complete sense. And probably would have amped it up quite a bit.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, if they can get that character right, and I'm skeptical because for me, Blade should be 100% R-rated, people dancing in blood and that sort of thing. Yeah. But if they can nail that character, I mean, goddamn, that character, I mean, those movies are old as hell at this point. People still love that character. So there's a huge opportunity there, but whether or not they can pull it off, who can say?
I'm not betting my grandmother on it, as I always say. Hold on a second. We got a couple of a good friend of the show and stops in on our live streams quite a bit. He's often a guest on the show. And he says, welcome back to live streaming because I've been away for a few weeks. And welcome to the show, James. He says, aside from Spider-Man No Way Home, I haven't really enjoyed an MCU movie since Infinity War. Yeah, I'm of the same mind. Bland or just no interest. And he said, I just subbed to your channel, James.
Oh, hell yeah. Thank you, sir. Much appreciated.
ASAP. And James will take the bullet for those shows that you don't want to watch. He will brave the storm and bring you back a funner review that at least will make you laugh.
Well, the sad reality is, as much as I would rather just do content about things that I love, sometimes you get more traffic if you spread a little hate and venom. I mean, that's just the sad reality of the internet. And so I would never want to be one of those people that's just kind of banging my shoe on the table in frustration just for its own sake, because then I feel like it gets very inauthentic and it gets super douchey really quickly. But I try every once in a while to just suck it up and review something that I hate, as is the case with Lord of the Rings and Rings of Power. But it's got to be balanced out with my love and affection for things like House of the Dragon, because if all I'm going to do is just shit on things from a great height, I'll just do something else. I'll start doing MMA commentary. I'll find something else that I'm fired up about, because if you don't have that passion fueling your interest in something, it makes it very hard just to get in front of your computer and turn everything on and get to work if you don't have something that's really driving you. Yeah. But I won't lie, I haven't minded getting more traffic than is typical on my channel by tackling Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. So I guess people, they feed on the hate. They like it.
The algorithm functions off confrontation. You know, that's what gets the algorithm moving. So
absolutely moves the needle.
So there you are. So Jack Russell is one of the monster hunters who sort of goes around unidentified, but wearing Mezzo Aztec kind of face paint. So I guess they're going with a Latin Jack Russell here. Well, you've got Gael Garcia, okay. And the idea is that there's a monster on the grounds. They've attached the Bloodstone to the monster. First hunter to kill the monster grabs the stone,
which grants like immortality and that sort of thing. I
mean,
the original Bloodstone lived like 10,000 years.
Yeah. So obviously lots of people, that's, priceless item. You've got Elsa Bloodstone, and I did enjoy her character very much. I would have liked to have seen Ulysses, a bit more backstory on Ulysses to explain who he was.
Absolutely. Get like Brad Pitt in there with like a big wig and just do it.
Would have worked. Yeah. I would have liked to have seen some backstory on Jack Russell.
Yeah.
There's nothing. I mean, there's just, everybody just kind of shows up and, oh God, what was her name? The woman who's the evil stepmother. But she was really great. She was in Hereditary, and I can't remember her name.
Oh, Harriet Sansom Harris, that actress played Verussa.
Yeah, Verussa. She's Verussa Bloodstone, and very contemptuous of Elsa's return. And so everybody goes out into this maze, sort of Shining Lake kind of maze to hunt for this monster. And it turns out that the monster is the Man-Thing. And so you see this hand sort of come out of nowhere and grab Gael Garcia, and he's like, and then he's like, "Oh, hey, what's going on? It's you! All right, we're gonna get you out of here. Don't worry about it."
It turns into a buddy movie. Yeah, I just wanted to give a quick shout out for people who like the character of Elsa Bloodstone. I was pretty unfamiliar with her character until adulthood, because they didn't even really introduce her until the early 2000s. But Warren Ellis had a comic called Next Wave that I think ran for 12 issues total, where he basically took a bunch of Z-listers from the Marvel Universe, put them together, and he could kind of do anything he wanted. And it was some of the funniest fucking shit that I've ever read. But Elsa Bloodstone was on that lineup, and she was just awesome. And of course, being a Brit, Warren Ellis knew how to write all that shit talk, and he knew how to really kind of get invested in her personality. So for people who are curious about her, I would direct them all towards Next Wave issues 1 through 12. Warren Ellis just knocked it right out of the park, and drawn beautifully by Stuart Immonen, I think is how you pronounce his last name. But anyway, very, very fun Marvel comic.
Warren Ellis is a fucking Renaissance man.
Yeah.
It's the dude who hangs out with Nick Cave.
Yep.
So, I mean, if you're hanging out and regularly partnering with Nick Cave, that says something right there.
It's a cool circle of friends, without a doubt.
Yeah, that is. In a small circle, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's fucking great. So, I mean, yeah, you're right. From there, it kind of turns into a buddy movie with, martial arts kind of fighting going on in the maze. And
did the fight scenes work for you? Because the one that jumped out of me was when Elsa chops off that dude's hand and is like using his weapons against him. So I guess it doesn't really work as a horror experience for me, but it did kind of work as just Marvel action. And Marvel needs to bring some new choreographers in so that every single girl doesn't fight the exact same way
Like
as Black
Black
Widow.
Widow.
I
Yeah.
mean, every single movie,
Yeah.
they jump up and do that split move where they grab and swing around and like throw them down with the legs. I'm
Like
all right.
Rey Mysterio. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
It's
that looks
619.
yeah, that looked great in 2010 and Iron Man 2 and that sort of thing. But we have seen that move now many, many, many times over. Maybe bring in some of these fine athletes from the UFC and show off some new technique.
You know, a good old-fashioned wrestling takedown, or you know, even the WWE, bring somebody in from that. You know, some of the trainers from that, because yeah, they've been doing that head, the whole twirl, and you know, the shoulder roll, and it's always the same sort of fighting. It didn't do it didn't do anything for me, to be perfectly honest. You know, I'm smiling now, laughing about it, and thinking about. Because I enjoyed Gael Garcia. You know, he's working with the script that they gave him.
Yep.
You know, I'm enjoying, you know, the woman who played Elsa Bloodstone. She's working with the same script. It's not a great story. I mean, and they get to the point where they grab the stone, you know, and free. Go ahead. I'm sorry. You want to say?
Oh, I was going to ask you, just what did you think of Michael? I keep seeing different I guess pronunciations of his last name, Michael Giacchino. I don't know if that's correct or not, but former composer, but making the switch to director. What did you think of him as a first-time director?
Well, I mean,
and he's from New Jersey. He's from Riverside.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say about that. I didn't enjoy it very much. I don't know that that's necessarily his fault. The story was written by somebody who I think had 2 credits for Hawkeye or something, who did like 2 episodes of Hawkeye, one of the writers. And then one of the other writers had a long list, had like 60 some odd writing credits. And so, I didn't think much of the whole thing, period.
Yeah, I will watch more shows or flicks that he directs. I mean, if he wants to make the switch from being a composer to a director, that's a completely different skill set. And he's got a giant list of like 150 credits as composer on big movies like Thor, Love and Thunder and Lightyear and Jurassic World Dominion. I mean, obviously, he is in demand. I mean, he did the music for friggin' The Batman for Matt Reeves. I'm surprised that for somebody who is like in the mature phase of his career with so many giant opportunities that he would want to make the switch to being a director. But who knows? Maybe he always wanted to be a director and just has come about it through the most roundabout way imaginable. But God damn, he's like just his list of credits between Pixar and Disney and that sort of thing. These are what, irrespective of what you think of the final products, these are giant productions that he's working on.
Yeah, though he has a lot of, it's like 157 or something like that, or 162 A-lists, like, you know, productions under his belt as a, you know, musician or, you know, guy running the, you know, the music for that sort of thing.
Even the friggin' The Incredibles. I mean, geez, I mean, he's been doing this stuff for a long time.
Well, it's my understanding also that Marvel is having trouble finding directors and writers because they know that they kind of don't have a lot of creative freedom. Like it all has to fall within a certain formulaic.
Marvel should just get rid of directors. They should just let these productions be run by producers and writers, because that's what it feels like. Just let the assembly line, just embrace the assembly line and say, you know what? We no longer are even going to worry about hiring directors for these productions, because a lot of times the special effects and the fight scenes are being worked out years in advance before directors even hired. So it's like, well, shit, what's the director there for? Apart from just the publicity when you announce who is going to be associated. Because I feel like at a certain point, maybe around 2014 or so, they would let directors leave their fingerprints on the films. Like when James Gunn did the first Guardians film in 2014, it felt like a James Gunn movie. Or when the Russo brothers did Captain America Winter Soldier, they were almost kind of inventing their style on the fly, but it felt like a very distinctive original production.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
But it seems like those days are in the past now.
Yeah, look at Kenneth Branagh's Thor. You know, in that dialogue with Anthony Hopkins, you know, when he casts Thor out of
Out of Asgard?
Asgard, yeah, I almost said Valhalla. For some reason, I got Valhalla stuck in my head. Yeah, when he casts him out of that, I mean, just the quality of the writing, was, and then you look at, like Love and Thunder, and you're like, holy shit, how is this, what the hell happened?
Yeah, I think just Kevin Feige's making too many goddamn shows and movies. There's a period where they're making 2, sometimes 3 productions a year, and he could really keep his hand on the tiller, and he could really focus and could try to make each one matter. And I think the magic of the Marvel formula for a while was this idea that you can't miss anything, because if you're going to want to appreciate all the emotional payoffs, whether you love them or hate them, you got to see all the movies in order to understand these big moments. Like when Thor shows up with Groot and friggin' Rocket in Infinity War, if you hadn't seen the previous 2 Guardians movies, well, that moment had less of a payoff. But now they make so much shit. I just refuse to watch all of it. I'm not going to spend. I have too little time left on this planet to devote 10 hours to a show that I don't like. But once you start skipping some, we're like, oh, well, if I can skip some, maybe I can skip all of them. So I think Marvel's best days, I think, are behind them. But obviously, as long as they can squeeze $1 out of the brand, Disney will continue to do so.
If you look at the lineup for the next 2 phases, there's nothing to get excited about. At 5 and 6, you're like, really? That's it? So yeah. And Feige, I think he's got a 10-year plan that involves nothing I have any interest in. But we are here talking about Werewolf by Night because the werewolf is my favorite movie monster. I have that nostalgia bait from all the previous success that Marvel has.
Well, what are your favorite werewolf movies?
Let's see.
Well, what's the holy trinity that like you would take to a desert island?
Probably Ginger Snaps Back, the beginning. That one where they're trapped in the soldier fort. I love that one. I hate The Howling. I hate that movie. I can't stand it. Even though I'm resentful of horror comedies, I'd probably have to go with An American Werewolf. The third one, I'd probably go with The Wolfman.
Okay, gotcha.
The old 1941 Universal classic, The Wolfman, because that's just a fantastic film. What about you?
My favorite werewolf flicks, American Werewolf in London, I've definitely seen more than any of the others. And that I could get a lot of mileage out of that one. No problem. It's got a little bit of everything. It's got legit horror, and it's got a little nudity, and it's got some great laughs. So I might just take American Werewolf in London. But what was it? Dog Soldiers? Was that the Neil Marshall movie from 2002?
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that.
That was a cool one, which I enjoyed without a doubt. I'm sorry?
With Sean Pertwee.
Yeah, that one I always kind of circle back to. And there are a lot of them that I never saw the one with Benicio del Toro from maybe 10 years ago.
Joe Johnston's. It's not great. It's not great. But it's worth a watch. I own it on Blu-ray. That lines up perfectly with Stoker's Dracula, the Coppola movie, where I want to like it. And I had this thing going on with me for about 10 years where, like, every 6 months I would put the Blu-ray in or the DVD in. This is the time. I'm going to like it. And I'd get halfway through it. I'm like, no, this movie.
But at least Stoker's Dracula has Monica Bellucci in that giant seduction scene with Keanu Reeves, where it's like the movie. I think that movie's. It's uneven, but when it works, it really works.
Yeah. If you could get 25-year-old Monica Bellucci to rise out of your bed, then you're not too.
That's nice work if you can get it as a filmmaker.
Wolf with Jack Nicholson was a really good one. Yeah, Howl's another one.
I saw that one in the theater, the Mike Nichols movie.
Yeah, that was good. Michelle Pfeiffer and Christopher
Michelle
Plummer,
Pfeiffer
of all people. Yeah, that was
James Spader.
Michelle Pfeiffer. Yeah. He was great as that. James Spader's always great.
Absolutely.
So, we get there, and they find the stone, but Russell can't touch it because he is a monster. So he's sort of discovered. Man-Thing makes his escape. Next thing you know, Verussa imprisons Jack and Elsa in a cage together and initiates a change. No transformation scene.
Yeah, it's all done in silhouette behind, like in the background. And I have to say, the before and after, I wasn't that impressed with the monster design, but I did like the shadow on the wall and just seeing her kind of dawning horror. Almost reminded me of that scene from Pinocchio from 1940, where a kid's turning into a donkey and you only see the shadow, and it's absolutely terrifying. But I wouldn't have minded a slightly cooler looking werewolf. And I've been seeing it with a lot of the reviews online. People either like the first half or they like the second half. but don't like the whole thing. If you were to kind of weigh in on whether you like the first half or the second half better, which is the stronger half for you, just as a werewolf fan?
Probably the first half. Probably the first half. I think that they played it on the cheap, where they didn't want to give some sort of transformation scene, although it could be Disney, like you said, and they're just not going to do anything scary, in which case, why open this up in the first place?
Yeah, why do a Halloween special?
That isn't scary. Yeah, why do a Halloween special that isn't scary? But, that's... but, I mean, I did like her reaction. I thought that was really convincing up against the cage, and what it reminded me of, which is another of my favorite werewolf movies, is the Hammer classic, Curse of the Werewolf.
Oh, the one with Oliver Reed?
With Oliver Reed, where Oliver Reed is trapped in the jail cell with that guy when he's changing, and at the end of the movie, he has one final transformation, and there's some poor bastard who's just trapped in the cell with him while it's happening. And I remember watching that as a child, and I was just horrified because it was like something out of a nightmare where you're just trapped while this awful thing is happening. And this monster is going to eat you or whatever. And that's what that reminded me of.
Yeah, Laura Donnelly, I feel like she really sold it. So yeah, I don't know if I've seen a ton of flicks or shows in which she appears, but she definitely caught my attention. And also, I'd seen some reviews in advance where some people saying, "Oh, well, certain kinds of men are gonna dislike her character," and I was like, I don't know what that means, but at least I'm curious. But if they were, I guess I went into expecting her to be like a She-Hulk character, but she was not. I thought Elsa Bloodstone was a pretty cool addition.
Cool. Yeah, she was more of a Natasha Romanoff kind of character. She held her own, but I mean, she was willing to partner up with Jack. She wasn't telling him what to do all the time, or having to one up all the time, or it wasn't written that way. So I was appreciative of that.
Oh, she's from Northern Ireland. Interesting. All right.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I mean, I don't know if she's redhead or brunette or whatever. She didn't come into the color segment, but it initiates the change, and then you start to go into what I called in the video parkour werewolf.
Yeah.
With acrobatic flips, but I was kind of checked out at this point.
Yeah, I would have preferred to just see him like old school horror style, just kind of stand there and just rip people limb from limb. But this is Marvel, and Marvel has a certain flavor. And I guess increasingly Marvel's flavor is just, it's like when you go bowling, when you got the little things on the side where the ball can't go out of bounds. Like that's how Marvel is now. You kind of can't go out of bounds, but so much.
The flavor is risk averse.
Yeah. And like you said earlier, they're struggling to find good filmmakers. And yeah, I get it. I mean, if you're a good filmmaker, if you're a really talented filmmaker, and pick your poison in terms of which filmmakers you really love, you want to get so many opportunities at bat. And it's like, you want to make something that's going to express your interests, your tastes and sensibilities. And if Marvel's not going to allow that, then yeah, once again, it's going to feel increasingly like an assembly line without any real flavor. And yeah, I think there will be the occasional exception to the rule where something really magical will happen, but it's going to take them somebody like Christopher Nolan would have to, for whatever reason, have to say, oh, I suddenly want to do this, even though I don't think he would want to under any circumstances. But you would need a giant filmmaker with a massive name. But I just don't see how Marvel would ever incentivize anybody, unless it's someone like Raimi, where he made Oz, which was a giant flop. And he almost was kind of in semi-retirement for like 8 years. And he kind of came out of retirement to do Multiverse of Madness. I feel like that's when you can snatch up a really good director. If they've had a long break since their last film, then maybe Marvel will be able to rope in some very established filmmakers.
But even then, I mean, it didn't seem like he had that much freedom. My understanding was that he really didn't, it was, you're going to follow.
And I love how he and the writer both admitted they didn't even watch WandaVision before they made it. I'm like, it's one thing if you haven't seen previous entries with a particular character, but if I were making a movie for Marvel or writing a movie for Marvel or just involved, I would want to know everything about that character, all the good and bad interpretations of the character and all their appearances. And I love how they're like, fuck it. I ain't got time to watch the show with Wanda, but we're still going to use the character.
Feige, Jessica Gao, all those people now and running all these things, they don't even read comics.
If they don't care, if they're not emotionally invested, then I feel no pressure to be emotionally invested either. Because for me, reading comics in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, they were just so precious and so sacred. It's like, wouldn't it be cool if one day you could actually see some of these stories on the big screen done right? But never in a million years would I have anticipated then that it would be amazing and then it would circle back around and I would just be indifferent and almost kind of disgusted. Like maybe the world that I always hoped for as a kid, maybe it was better if it never happened at all.
I own all. Look, as far as it goes, I can always improve my back catalog. And I've got all the Blu-rays all the way up to Infinity War, and I will never mind watching the first Iron Man again. Joe Johnston's the first Avenger with Captain America. I love that Incredible Hulk with Ed Norton. The first Avengers with who directed that? It wasn't.
That was Joss Whedon, who's been canceled.
It was Joss Whedon. Yeah. That was a great film. It was a great film.
Yeah, The Battle for New York. I watched it like 50 times.
I don't see anything wrong with that at all.
But it was so cool at that time. Also, it was almost like you were rooting for the underdog, because if you're a comic book nerd, or at least had been in the past, you always knew the potential of this giant library of characters. So you're almost like rooting for it to be a success, so that the whole world would finally be forced to recognize what you've known all along. And now I find myself, instead of just buying comics, I just buy books. I buy novels. And so I read fantasy, I read science fiction, I read horror, all the time and energy that I used to devote to reading Marvel and watching Marvel, I now just devote to other areas. And maybe that's partially just aging out of it. But I think also just lackluster storytelling. Life's too short to subject myself to lackluster storytelling. I want to follow, I want storytelling excellence. Whether I'm reading it or watching it, I just refuse to accept second-rate storytelling.
Isn't this always the case, though? I mean, something small and awesome goes on, and then it sort of gets corporatized.
It starts to suck.
Yeah, and it just turns to shit, and you're just.
What would be an exception? Like I think it's very easy to be cynical. Like, all right, something starts out small. Like Lord of the Rings in the 50s was basically an unknown series of novels, and got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And obviously, when it reaches its zenith with the Peter Jackson films, and now it's just Amazon is just destroying that entire fictional setting. But what's an exception of something where a big corporation got involved and they made it bigger and better than ever before? Like, I'm thinking maybe like the Fox deal with the UFC. Like, I feel like the Fox deal in 2011 with UFC turned something that was kind of niche.
Just in terms of film.
Yeah, or just in terms of entertainment, where like I feel like every once in a while something is ready to level up. And I feel like when Fox and the UFC partnered up, that paved the way for ESPN and UFC. And I feel like UFC right now, if you're a fan, is really good, really consistent. Yeah. Almost every weekend, something amazing to get excited about.
Well, what you also had was Dana White not bowing out during COVID.
Yeah. He's
the only two people. Yeah, the only two people were him and Vince McMahon.
Yeah.
They were like, no, the show's going on. WrestleMania with no audience.
And I missed those COVID shows where you could hear the sound effects of like bone on bone. Like, because when you're watching like a big show, you kind of forget of what it actually sounds like when knuckles collide with someone's jaw. But during that period when there are no fans in the audience, like, ooh, you can really hear the impact.
As long as I would live, I will never forget Justin Gaethje versus Tony Ferguson.
Yeah, that
was one of the most heartbreaking things it was as close to a Rocky movie as I'd ever want.
And the way Tony was kind of shaking his head at the end.
Yeah, and he's stumbling, and that was just awful. But
that was violent.
Heard every single smack, thud, and just crunch. And it was just awful. Yeah.
But getting back to film and television, it's hard to think of situations where, I guess maybe when Amazon decided to save The Expanse. I've got The Expanse books over here. They did 3 seasons with Sci-Fi. It got canceled. Amazon swooped in and said, all right, we're going to make 3 more seasons. So every once in a while, an injection of cash is greatly appreciated and can be helpful. But at this point, I feel like the Disney Plus app is such a hungry beast and requires such regular infusions of fresh and original content that I don't know if it's possible for Marvel and Star Wars and all these brands to give Disney Plus enough content where they can just run this shit round the clock year round. And I guess now it's like Marvel's starting to be like with like the comics. There are periods in the comics where like, say they're publishing 30 issues a month of different titles. I might buy 5 or 6 of them, of the ones that I liked, and ignore the rest. I have the exact same attitude now towards their shows and movies. I watch the ones that interest me, and the rest can go fuck themselves.
Right, but I disagree with you to some extent, because I think you can continue to feed the beasts. You have at least 5 decades worth of canon there and the stories. But nobody wants to watch a Moon Knight series where Moon Knight isn't in the series. And ultimately, like, the Scarlet Beetle becomes the hero. Nobody wants to watch a Hawkeye series where Hawkeye is supplanted by, some teeny bopper kid.
I guess Disney's chasing that young audience, and guys our age, they increasingly look at us being totally disposable. And my attitude is, all right, you think I'm disposable? I will take my eyeballs and my attention and my dollars elsewhere, because I do have buying power when it comes to content. And like, if I can't find something that I like with Marvel and Disney, I'll play Elden Ring on the Xbox or whatever. Like, I'm more than happy to take my business elsewhere when people no longer seek my company, so to speak.
Yeah, or just continue to make content that addresses that point.
Yeah.
That's, so there are options. But all right, let's get back to Werewolf by Night. So yeah, parkour werewolf, Jack wins the day with Elsa. I mean, because we've been talking about Werewolf by Night probably less than half of this time, because there's not that much of a story. It's not a failing. It's just,
it's 1 hour of content. I was
55 minutes.
Yeah, they I think, is it better or worse than a lot of the other Marvel stuff? The honest answer is I cannot say, because I skip so much Marvel content. Now, I mean, I see the movies. I saw Spider-Man No Way Home. I saw Multiverse of Madness. I saw Thor: Love and Thunder. But I've been skipping so many of their shows. I don't know if this is a step above or a step below where Marvel typically is, but goddamn, it's very hard for me to remain engaged with the Marvel shows these days. And I don't see that changing. And when I look at that giant chart of all the crap coming our way, I would love nothing more than to see Fantastic Four finally get a good movie after so many failed attempts at doing so. But my confidence in the Marvel brand right now is at an all-time low. And so I will be happily surprised when something's good. There will be a good Marvel movie at some point in the next 5 years. I just don't know which one it will be.
Neither do I. And I don't think Tracy Lords is coming back for Blade. So, that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, Blade 1 and Blade 2, they will always be good.
Yeah. But Blade, by now, the third is like a masterpiece by today's standards.
But what's funny is that people always
Schindler's List.
But people forget that it was Blade that ignited the modern movie era for superheroes, because prior to Blade, everything had kind of ended with Batman and Robin. But I feel like it wasn't Spider-Man, it wasn't X-Men, it wasn't all these other kind of marquee franchises. It was Blade that created the modern era, and everything else kind of followed after that. And so, yeah, Blade got this whole 24-year craze of superhero movies up and running. And so
with Steven Dorff biting people's throats out right there in the middle of a party, and porn star Tracy Lords right there in the first 5 minutes going to a blood-soaked rave. I mean,
yeah, it was fun.
You want stories that go for it.
Yeah. And stars will go for it. Wesley Snipes, he was invested. He was engaged. Oh, yeah. He was all in.
Yeah. Instead, we've got this now, which, Gael Garcia and the Man-Thing drinking coffee to Judy Garland's Over the Rainbow. What the fuck?
Yeah, Marvel, it's trying real hard to be cute. And I just went, the moment something becomes cute, I'm out.
This is why I start, as soon as this was over, I said I was going to do a double feature on Friday night. I was going to watch Werewolf by Night, and then I was going to go to Hellraiser. But I was so aggravated by Werewolf by Night that I couldn't get into Hellraiser. So yeah, I just turned.
Are you a diehard? Are you a diehard Hellraiser fan, or casual, or
no? I'm a Clive Barker fan, but I think that Hellraiser from '87 is like an Argento film, in that the visual effects of the time don't capture what the filmmaker's trying to do, so it just gives me a headache. I actually thought the first Hellraiser movie was really slow. Like for the first 30 minutes, it's only a 90-minute movie, but like the first third of the movie, like really nothing happens.
Yeah, whatever reason. Even though I was 11 at the time, I was mesmerized by the original Hellraiser, and I have no idea how many times I watched it, but goddamn, just little things like even in the beginning when the hand gets torn open on the nail on the walls, they're moving in and things like that.
Yeah.
I was totally on board. And then as an adult, I discovered the Hellbound Heart. But
yeah.
Since we're kind of sort of switching gears, should we just dive right into the new Hellraiser?
Yeah. Let's get into that, because that was actually wait, hold on one second. We got a comment. It's from Eric. He said, "Do you think the over the rainbow scene was an attempted nod to the shawarma scene that people enjoy from the original Avengers?" I'll be honest, it never occurred to me to make that kind of connection. I just think that this is the mode that Disney is in, some sort of feminized, light, risk averse kind of thing. And somewhere someone thinks that this is a good idea that has absolutely no background in comics. And probably, a background in progressive politics or whatever.
The way I always try to compare things to food. If Marvel in the 80s was all about selling cheeseburgers and hot dogs for Marvel fans, nowadays a lot of them are trying to sell you kale shakes. And if you want to sell kale shakes, fine. But don't expect me to watch each and every single thing that you make, because sometimes I'm in the mood for our Five Guys as opposed to a kale shake. And I recognize the value of a kale shake from time to time. But 80s Marvel, when you had Frank Miller and John Byrne and Chris Claremont and all these people just kicking ass month after month, it was a very fun time to be a young Marvel fan.
Yeah. And me personally, and I'm just a stalwart. I'm never going to be in the mood for a kale shake. So ever. Totally, I don't want to die in perfect health. I just, that's not my goal. Gotcha. I'm not one of those here for a short time, a good time, that kind of thing either.
Michael Chandler, baby. Yeah.
I'm not going for no.
Not here for a long time. I'm here for a good time, and he's been delivering. Yeah. Give that guy a Marvel show.
Ooh, that fight with Gagey. Holy shit, opening up that main event
what about
card.
His kick to Tony Ferguson's jaw when his brain almost came at the top of his head? Holy shit.
I just feel for Tony Ferguson.
That hot streak he had, that win streak when he won like 11 fights in a row. It's one of the best winning streaks in the history of MMA.
It wasn't against anyone big,
but it was so goddamn fun to watch. He was just a Terminator back then. So he will always.
He was El Cucuy, man.
Yeah,
he was El Cucuy, the demon.
Yeah, it was a great era.
Yeah. All right, so Hellraiser. Now, I was not a fan of. There are two types of people, I think. I think there are 80s people and there are 90s people. I parked my car in the 90s. I grew up in the 80s, but I didn't think they were that great. Going through the 80s, I didn't think they were that great. Some people think that the 80s, and I have friends my age, or even a little older, who swear that the 80s were the greatest time that ever existed in the history of history.
Because they've forgotten all the shitty stuff that happened back then. But now we remember the good songs and the good movies. But in the moment, I was born in 76. If in the moment, it was a weird decade. And now just enough time has passed where a lot of the crap has kind of fallen by the wayside.
Rose-colored glasses.
Absolutely. So they're remembering it very selectively. And yes, I can tell you, movies like Blue Velvet are really cool. And movies like Amadeus are really cool. Like I love the 80s. But the cool stuff is a small part of the 80s experience.
Yeah, very, very much the microcosm of what was actually happening back then. I was not in terms of 80s horror. And that leads me into this sort of subgenre from the 80s. 80s horror. I mean, people just live and die in the 80s. They still haven't moved out of it. And I go into horror content creation. Content creators still talking. Every day on social media about, Kurt Russell and Carpenter. And, it's just like, that was 50 years ago. I just saw the 40th anniversary of The Thing and Fathom Events on the big screen. It was beautiful to watch. It was beautiful to watch. It's still a fantastic film and one of the goats of horror in my mind. But it was 40 years ago. And not everything from that period holds up. I don't think Barker's Hellraiser holds up. It was an original idea. I was much more of a fan of Lord of Illusions from the 90s.
Gotcha.
With Bakula, Famke Janssen, that kind of thing. Nightbreed's good, that sort of thing. But this, again, wasn't expecting anything and was very pleasantly surprised. I enjoyed this movie. It wasn't the greatest thing I ever saw, but I think it's like the 11th movie in the series or something like that.
I honestly don't know how many there have been. I haven't seen all of them. I've seen most of them, but yeah, there's some
Hellraiser pretty bad.
So, let's just to be generous. They're not all created equal.
they're not all written and directed by Barker, which makes a significant difference. In his association to the source material, of course, because he is the creator. But you've got a pretty good story here. I mean, I liked how it opened up in Serbia. I'm like, wow, that's a gritty, sparse, kind of borderline, still evil kind of place. I mean, when you say Serbia, you don't think of Hawaii or Bali or
You think of Slobodan Milosevic and genetic cleansing.
yeah, and and mass graves and extermination camps and things. I mean,
when I was in high school, every image coming out of Serbia was rivers choked with dead bodies. So
yeah,
that's what I remember. I mean, I've been to Croatia, their neighbor, in 2002, and it was different then. And it was a film festival, and it was the summer, and it was nice. But yeah, when you think Serbia, there's some dark chapters for people who are old enough to remember them.
So an excellent introduction to a Hellraiser movie. I'm like, okay, yeah, hell. Maybe the portal to hell is in Serbia somewhere, And so, you've got the lawyer, Serena, was her name? Hold on,
the actress from Succession.
Yeah, Serena. Yeah, Serena, the lawyer. She goes to acquire the cube. Is this? Yeah. Okay, so she goes to acquire the cube, and then next thing you know, they're in a
Massachusetts,
big to-do. Yeah, they're in a big to-do party.
Yeah.
And the Voight character, played by Goran Viznik, is that how you pronounce his name? I remember him from the ER days, where he was the replacement for George Clooney when George Clooney left, because we didn't have a lot of cable back then. So Thursday night, it was just like, okay, I'm going to watch ER and see, something sad happen every Thursday. I don't know what the fuck I was thinking about back then, because someone always died. But yeah, I mean, you've got this sex worker who sticks out like a sore thumb, and he's got like the short sleeve shirts and everybody's in like bow tie. It's like a black tie event, and here's this guy and she's like, oh, Voight wants to meet you personally over here. And then we'll take it from there. What did you think?
Of that opening or the movie in general?
Either or.
I would say that the movie needed more sadomasochism to really feel like a real Hellraiser experience, because I like Jamie Clayton as Pinhead, and I thought she was totally invested, and she had a great poise and great tone of voice and a good performance. But what the movie lacked, for my part, just from reading The Hellbound Heart, is this idea that there are people out there who want to meet the Cenobites, who are excited to meet the Cenobites because they promise pleasure, and obviously their understanding of pleasure is quite different from what like a sex maniacs might be. But like, that's part of the horror, is like you think the Cenobites are going to invite you into a world of sin and vice and orgies and all this crazy shit, and as it turns out, no, they're just going to rip you limb from limb and tear your soul apart, etc. and so forth. And so I was always on board with the original Hellraiser, and I loved like half of the sequel. And the source material, Hellbound Heart, is really solid. And that first chapter is all about the first encounter with the Cenobites and basically being asked a series of questions. But in the end, they're only going to fuck you up if you sign up. And I think that's what was missing in this movie, where people would accidentally get pricked and then the Cenobites would just show up and just kill you. And I feel like there needs to be that deal with the devil, that Faustian bargain, where you're like, you give me the orgasm of all orgasms, and I will give myself over to you.
I'll let you flame me alive.
I'll let you flame me alive.
Yeah.
And so that
show the stupid motherfucker who would, bring this guy up here. Yeah, please.
Exactly.
Next.
And so
number 12,
And so I think the movie was very solid, and I think if they continue to make more of them, I will come back and watch more of them. But I would hope they would get somebody in there who at least has got some insight into S&M culture. Not that I'm like some S&M expert or enthusiast or whatever, but that there needs to be part of the bargain where like the characters are curious as to what the Cenobites have to offer, or at a minimum, like the girl in the first Hellraiser, when she accidentally summons them, she makes a deal. She's like, look, I will show you where my Uncle Frank is, who has escaped you, and you can take him and don't take me. Deals with the devil.
That's what happened here, isn't it? I mean, what was it, Riley? She opens the box, and because at first I couldn't stand any of them. I couldn't stand Riley. I couldn't stand Trevor.
I didn't like Riley either. A bunch of teenagers cussing and screaming at each other, and
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
you got the other weird people that are in the other part of the house listening to them fuck, and you're just this is weird. Like, what the fuck is? You're all annoying, Nora and Colin, and then like the two guys are in bed like reciting Shelley. You're like, what the fuck does it? Like, it needed an editor.
Well, what they needed, instead of a scene of two guys very affectionately quoting, English
Poetry.
writers from like the 1800s to each other, maybe they should have been indulging in a little S&M. And wouldn't it be great if we could ever meet somebody who would show us how it's really done? Like, they should have made the movie needed to be kinkier, needed to be a little more simple, needed to be a hornier movie, in my opinion.
But you're not an S&M enthusiast.
But I'm not.
I said it twice in 90 seconds, but I'm not an.
But I just feel like there needed to be a lustier kind of vibe to it, because what I often felt like the movie was employing instead was a little bit more of like a slasher vibe, where like you see something out of the corner of your eye, you turn around, and then they're gone. I don't feel like the Cenobite should ever chase people. They should never follow people. You summon them, you talk to them, you make a deal. You either make a good deal or a bad deal, but you make your deal, and then they do what they do. And I feel like they made the mistake that the third Hellraiser movie made, where they start feeling more like Jason or Freddy or Michael Myers, or like supervillains. Like the third Hellraiser movie, at one point, there's a guy who even has like, he's like a CD player Cenobite. I was like, oh, this is getting so fucking stupid. But yeah, I think they've lost sight of how the Cenobites, they can just stand there and be scary and terrifying and seductive and that sort of thing. And they don't have to chase you through mansions and that sort of thing. And I think this movie tried to be too action driven as opposed to horror driven, which I think was perhaps a direction that
would have been a better story. Maybe that's something you should write. I mean, and no bullshit. I mean, these things don't come into existence until somebody breathes life into them.
Well, that
sounds like a good story.
Clive Barker already wrote it. Yeah. I mean, he wrote the Hellbound Heart.
But that's not what they made in '87 even.
Yeah, that's true. But at least like the skeleton or the spine of it was there. And I feel like when in doubt, always go back to what made a franchise really cool in the first place. Like, why did you become a Marvel fan? Or why did you become a Lord of the Rings fan? Or why did you become a Hellraiser fan? And more often than not, it's the original text that got it all going. And you can always find like the qualities and ingredients that will kind of be a good guiding path for you.
Here's the thing. And even in the first movie, there's not that much sadomasochism. It's sort of implied. You see what happens to Frank you don't see what happens to Frank in the very beginning. You get to see these sort of hooks and these very close-up shots into what's clearly not, Frank. And then at the end, he sort of gets ripped apart, these sorts of things. But it's not that focused on it or prolonged in terms of the sadism. And this was kind of the same thing. And maybe they should have. I don't know. That would have been a much harder rating. And
yeah, probably that first movie is mostly concerned with Frank trying to come back to life, and having his girlfriend seduce men, bring them home, and hit him over the head with a hammer. And I think having like two horror stories happening at the same time is what made that first Hellraiser movie so freaky, because the story of Frank, inch by inch, kind of sort of slowly coming back to life, was so gross and so disgusting. And like bringing this guys in, one of whom like pisses in the corner. I'm like, what the? Y'all are a bunch of fucking animals. But like, it was just a sleazy movie in a lot of ways. It felt dirty, and I was like afraid that my parents were going to catch me watching it. And I think that sleaziness was absent from this new movie.
I don't think that, well, I mean, obviously you don't have Barker writing the script. You don't have Barker's executive producer on this.
Yeah, and he's a different guy these days. I mean,
yeah, I would say he's a different guy anyway. So because people were used to King, and then this other guy came along, and they're like, "Whoa, what is?" And he's always got some sadomasochism.
Barker's in his 70s. If he's still into S&M, I mean, I don't know if there are a lot of people in their 70s who are like really into that lifestyle. I mean, kind of caring, but who knows? I'll say it for the third time. I'm not into S&M. Just
Not that there's anything wrong with that,
Exactly.
But, I mean, Barker must have been about 35 when that first one came out.
Exactly. And he did visit a few weird sex clubs and I think I read somewhere where the writers of this new movie, or maybe it was the director, were talking with Barker about how do we update the S&M scene. And I know in the 80s, he went to a few clubs where people were wearing the leather, and he felt like that leather stuff's kind of passe these days. And I guess I would hope for the Cenobites to be a little kind of wetter and grosser looking. Like from the neck
No.
down, I feel like their costumes weren't particularly
See, I
like
like that.
bloody enough.
See, I like that. I like the cleaner, colder, more sterile kind of thing. And clearly, in Barker's film, you've got the meat hooks hanging and bits of flesh and everything like that. But from the 1987 perspective, it just looked like hamburger, which is the limitation of the time.
Yeah, and it was a
Um,
super low budget movie as well. It was
yeah,
his first movie.
yeah. Hold on a second. We got some. Eric says it's the 11th film overall, and a very hit and miss. I'm assuming he's saying.
The hot was a Freudian slip because some people do get off on these movies. If people are sitting around having orgies watching Hellraiser movies, I hope they're having fun. So yeah, I make no judgments.
Yeah. Okay. Just don't invite me.
Yeah. My weirdest experience watching a Hellraiser movie was when the third one came out. I was the summer I turned 16, and it was shot in Greensboro, North Carolina, and which is where I lived at the time. Okay. So a bunch of us went to the movie the night that a lot of the kids were all extras in the club scene. We all went to the movies together, and we actually took LSD ahead of time. It was the first time I'd ever taken it. And we laughed.
You watched Hellraiser, okay.
Oh my God. We laughed and screamed and had so much goddamn fun. It was one of the craziest movie experiences I've ever had because when that club sequence started and a lot of the dead people who were in front of Pinhead when he's walking around the room, like those were our friends. We're like, oh, there's Bryce, and like so on and so forth. So anyway, that was a ton. So there's no kinky S&M orgy in the theater, but we were all tripping balls watching Hellraiser and having a fine time.
And there you go. I'm trying to think. 87. I just started college.
Well, I guess the third one I think came out summer 92, and I can't remember what year the second one came. So it was the third one.
I think I was still in college then.
Yeah.
I think I was still in college in 92. But let's see. He says, and I liked in turn. You had mentioned the new Pinhead. I said I thought she was so good. She was just Pinhead. Like the priest, it didn't even occur to me that this was, something special to look at, which to me is the highest. That's a compliment.
Yeah, she was the best part of the movie by far, in my opinion.
Well, I don't know. Towards the end, this movie had a weird effect on me in that I thought everybody was annoying. And then in the second half of the movie, I started to become invested in all the characters.
Gotcha.
I became invested in what was going on with Riley and with Trevor. I didn't see the plot twist coming because I was actually so surprised that I was enjoying the movie. Now, this is a day off of watching Werewolf by Night, so, I'm like jaded to the max here. But, yeah, I liked the visual effects. I liked how they did with, like, the dimensions sort of opening up like the cube, like when they grabbed Nora out of the van. I thought it was a cool kind of sterile look.
That was definitely the best death scene of the movie. How like once they come for you, it's almost like a little pocket dimension opening up. And then I thought the best shot of the movie was when the needle going through her throat and you can hear her screaming.
Yeah.
The POV of the camera is in her throat as the needle came through. And I was like, yes, like give me like 20 more scenes just like that because like,
but I'm not a sadomasochist.
Yeah, I even though I'm not a sadomasochist, I need to see the technique being employed by the Cenobites.
See, I said this in that, does it have its obligatory contribution of rip and tear? Does it have obligatory sadism? Yes. But I mean, I could watch, The Tudors, or I could watch Braveheart, or I could watch, 1,000 other things that have much, in terms of this particular production, that have much more prolonged scenes of torture.
Yeah, I mean, the end of Braveheart, he's getting, at the end of Braveheart, even though it's out of frame, they're disemboweling him and pulling his intestines out.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to watch, any slave movie that you're going to get your gratuitous, scene of this. I had pulled some things off of YouTube to make in my video to make that comparison. I ended up going with some of the tamer scenes from the end of Braveheart. But I mean, you could, the Vikings or anything like that. So it wasn't, I mean, a lot of it was just implied, but it got the point across. And I personally didn't need to see that because it's not something that I want to see. Like, I don't want to see someone getting flayed. We can watch Game of Thrones, with like Ramsay Bolton, where he was like skinning people, and castrating and
chopping their dicks off.
Yeah. What he ended up doing to
Theon
Greyjoy, and those sorts. But they're just kind of cringy. So I don't know if that decision was made simply to make it appeal to a broader audience and probably
if this had been made
have
for
a much
Shudder,
easier rating.
Yeah, if they had made it for Shudder, that streaming platform, I imagine they would have been all bets are off. Get as weird as you like. But what I like is that the Hellraiser franchise at least feels like current and relevant again, where people are into it. People are excited. If people are excited and they feel like the audience is there, then more Hellraiser movies will be made, or perhaps more movies in that spirit. But I guess because Hellbound Heart and Hellraiser were brand new in the late 80s, what I would prefer to see is filmmakers taking inspiration from Clive Barker and creating their own original worlds. And I feel like, you mentioned earlier about how like Marvel will take any dead horse and beat it and beat it and beat it. As long as there's like $1 to be squeezed from its dead hide, they will continue whipping that dead horse until the end of time. And when it comes to franchise management now, I guess it's just, it all feels so cynical and calculated in how it's all just intellectual property that's out there to be leveraged and exploited to squeeze out a few extra dollars. Whereas I feel like when Clive Barker was writing all this crazy shit like Damnation Game and whatnot back in the 80s, it all came from a very real, organic place where he really wanted to just fuck people up with the most visceral stories possible.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, but I just want to see more filmmakers going for it and leaving some emotional scar tissue in an entire generation of kids where they are fucked up for life.
No, because that's the fucking point.
Yeah.
You're supposed to make cinema. Like, if you're just there to make a couple of bucks, then why the fuck are you there? Leave it to somebody who, and these sorts of things like squeeze a lot of the oxygen out of the room. And so it can be easy to overlook a smaller production because these sorts of films are still being made, the films that are going for it, but they're much smaller productions.
Yeah, and horror is
so you got to look at like, go ahead.
Is that horror's having a big year? There've been a lot of modest but successful horror films in 2022 that are not based on pre-existing IP. So I feel like the horror genre is in a very healthy place right now. Obviously, superheroes are big. But secretly, if you look at like the top 5 box office performers in any given week, and at any point this year, there are a couple little low budget horror films that are popping up here and there. So I feel like if you like this genre, it's a good time to be a horror fan. There are at least a lot of turns at bat to give us some cool stuff.
What I've discovered from my friend, I've met her here through the show, Julia Morgan over there in London, is that horror is alive and well. It's just happening in other parts. Real quality horror, where people are going for it, is happening in other parts of the world.
What was that Taiwanese one that came out earlier this year?
Sadness.
Oh my God, that was ruthless.
But in Asia, there's a lot of great horror coming out of Asia, South Korea, and Japan. These sorts of things in Latin America, they're making phenomenal horror. In Europe, in Ireland. They're making great films, but they're smaller productions, but you can tell this is being written and, acted out by people who give a shit.
Yeah.
Now the director of this has a pretty good resume. He directed a favorite movie of mine, The Ritual, a Netflix.
Yeah. I did see The Ritual. I didn't see his Rebecca Hall film, which he made after that, was a Night House. But I did see The Ritual on Netflix when it came out back in 2017. I enjoyed it. I think I prefer The Ritual to Hellraiser.
I think you're right. And I've been trying to get Adam Neville, the author of The Ritual, on the show for a while now. We haven't been able to put it together, but I'm hoping before too long, because that would just be fantastic. And that's, as always, or as almost always, the book is better. But it had really interesting monster design, and it was an original idea. Norse mythology as your criteria for the monster. Hold on a second, we got a few more comments. I agree with James on needing the people who here's another sadomasochist who opened the box to do it to enjoy pleasure, not realizing the pain that's coming, and that's what happens to Voight. That's basically what happened to Voight. He was just this hedonist who had the money to explore every possible little titillation. And so he decided to ramp it up to something else and just got, you know, yeah, that's not what he got. I really like how the box actually changed shape and stayed that shape instead of just opening, then going, yeah, I like that too, that there were these different configurations and each configuration open to a different option. He goes, I'll give it another shot. Maybe I've seen all 11 films that didn't feel any different than another sequel. I was more interested in this than I am in how. Well, yeah.
I will.
That's a perfect example.
Yeah, I'm going to skip Halloween Ends. I didn't even finish Halloween Kills. I think after I heard Evil Dies Tonight for the 12th time, I was like, you know what? I think I think I'm not having any fun anymore. So I turned off Halloween Kills, and I wasn't even that blown away by the David Gordon Green Halloween. I'm when it comes to Halloween, I'm perfectly content just to watch the original John Carpenter film until the day I die. Anytime I want Halloween in my life, I'll just watch Halloween, and I'm good.
I agree with you as far as I'm concerned. For the most part, it can begin and end in 78. I am a fan of the zombie remakes. I'm a fan of those. I own them. I thought that he did something original, and he had the absolute decency to let them all die after 2 movies, which says something nowadays, especially in horror. So I'm a fan of those.
The new Rob Zombie film of The Munsters?
The Munsters? No, not yet. Oh, Lord.
I saw his 2 Halloween films, but I've not seen The Munsters.
I heard it's kind of cute. Like, he literally made a comedy. Like, he's made a comedy about, the Munsters. It was funny because I went to one of the cons and I met, like, Rich Brake and a couple, and I'm like, you guys going to be in the Munster? Jeff Daniel Phillips. And I was like, are you going to be in? He's like, oh, I don't know. And of course he's in the lead, but he can't say anything at the time, I guess. So
yeah, what do you think is Rob Zombie's best horror film?
Devil's Rejects.
Gotcha.
Devil's Rejects. That was a completely different look. And I haven't seen Thousand Corpses in a long time. I remember I went with my friend Meg, and I remember literally walking the last 15 minutes. He just went for it. I remember that, and I remember the sounds and the visuals. Like, my equilibrium was off walking out of the theater. That's how much I was impressed by what he had done. But then to come back in the next movie with a completely different look. For the film, I would say Devil's Rejects. What about you?
I'm right there with you. Yeah. So
Rejects.
I'm always curious about what he's doing, but I just can't bring myself to watch The Munsters. I'm happy to watch the title sequence to the original show anytime, just because as a kid I caught it on reruns a billion times and loved it. Yeah. But I don't. Once again, it's just like all these old intellectual properties that people just keep dusting off and resurrecting. Make some new shit. All of our solutions for the future in the world of entertainment come from being inspired by the great stuff of the past and creating new shows, new movies, new ideas. And it just seems like sometimes like people are just like digging up old skeletons and making them walk again when they've long outlived their usefulness. And I just feel like, but obviously from the corporation standpoint, they think, oh, well, something's recognizable. It's easier to get things up and running. But I feel like people are just so thirsty for and so hungry for fresh, original, bold concepts that if you can find a way to break some new ground, people will show up. Or maybe I'm just a naive optimist, but I feel like when something's genuinely new and genuinely exciting and genuinely visionary, the audience will show up.
I think we're on the verge of something like that again. I mean, we had a resurgence like that in the 90s. And I say this all the time on the show, when we started to get the films from Robert Rodriguez. When we were looking at Quentin Tarantino, we were introduced to Spike Lee and Spike Jonze and Kevin Smith and, all these different sort of artists of the time that were making these low to medium budget, fantastic films that, actors that you would never assume would be working with, these first time directors,
Bless you.
Then, thank you. And then, those eras sort of, go away. and then it goes through another wave, and now we're sort of in this period where there are those smaller films that are being made. If you look at like Brandon Cronenberg, and what he's doing right now with like Possessor.
Yeah, I saw Possessor.
Oh my God, I had never. That's just such an original idea.
And he's got something else he's working on as well. I can't remember what it is, but
I think he's got a follow up to that, doesn't he?
Let's see, Brandon Cronenberg.
He did that movie Antiviral. About
he's got a movie
craze.
called Infinity Pool, which is completed but no release date in sight. But Brandon Cronenberg, he's back, and it's NC-17. Woohoo!
There you go.
Bring it.
We're set up. There are some filmmakers that are still doing it, but yeah, I think that we're in the place in the wave where it starts to break and it's going to die off.
Yeah, we're on the tail end of an era where the wave's going to crash and pull back. And I think we're probably not alone in really craving some fresh, original concepts, because I don't need to. People say, "Oh, I'd love to see a great new Predator movie, a great new Terminator movie, or a great new Marvel movie." It's like a lot of these ideas sometimes, like, they've had their moment, and I just, once again, be inspired by the greatness of the past, but then carve a bold new direction of your own. But once again, with like when you got everybody feeding the beast of Disney Plus or Netflix or whatever, it's tough. But I guess Netflix does occasionally get behind some original stuff. I'm more excited about HBO Max and Netflix than I am about Disney Plus. Disney Plus, I just have a very sour taste in my mouth.
I don't know if you've seen it, but I did a video for it. It's kind of controversial. Dahmer.
Oh, I haven't seen it yet. No, but
holy shit!
It's been a monster success.
That first episode is now I know that I was telling you earlier. Somebody was saying that this week's House of the Dragon was the best episode of anything that he's seen this year. I would put the first episode of Dahmer ahead of it.
I remember you and I both lived through the Dahmer era, so I almost feel like I've kind of already seen it. But what's so cool and original about Dahmer?
It is just so on the fucking it just goes for it. Like, it's just like, have you seen how they did Mindhunter?
Oh yeah, I like the first season quite a bit. The second season less so.
Yeah, there's too many frustrating politics attached to it, but it's just breathtaingly bold.
Well, I'm going to add it to my queue right now while we're on the subject.
And his oh God, what's his name? I can't think of his name off the top of my head.
Evan Peters?
Yeah. What a performance.
All right, so I'm getting...
You really do get the feeling like you're there watching Dahmer do this shit. It's not, you sort of get lost in the production. It's
gotcha. Well, maybe they should have gotten the filmmakers who made Dahmer to work on the new Hellraiser film. But yeah, I've been seeing everybody go so crazy about it. But sometimes there are certain events where you live through them in real time, where there's so much media coverage of them. I mean, whether it's on the magazine racks or on the news or whatever, where you get so immersed in it that you almost kind of can't go there. I remember I felt the same way when that OJ Made in America documentary came out on ESPN a few years back. And then I finally did watch it. I was like, oh, I get why people are losing their minds over this. This documentary is astonishing. So even though I felt like I knew the OJ story, I really didn't. I needed to see the documentary. So same thing with the Dahmer story. I probably need to just go ahead and watch it. I probably don't know it nearly as well as I think I do.
No, I seriously doubt you do either. And I grew up 10 years. I'm probably about 10 years older than you are. I was born in 1968. So, yeah, I mean, it's just because, I mean, I'm not fascinated by this kind. I run a horror channel, but I'm not fascinated by.
Well, I love how I keep saying I'm not into S&M.
Yeah. I'm not a Dahmer fan.
I'm not into cannibalism, but.
No. Yeah, I'm asleep with mannequins.
I just only had a piece that one time.
I was hungry. Leave me alone, right? It was that or a kale shake, what are you going to do?
Exactly. Kale shake mixed with human flesh. That's the only way you can make it go down.
Exactly. You got to have something to ease the medicine there. But, I mean, getting back to Hellraiser real quick.
What did you think of the final scene with the creation of the new Cenobite?
I was okay with it. It wasn't necessary.
Yeah, I like the creation scene in Hellraiser 2 more. When it came to seeing a Cenobite being given form, I thought that was a more effective scene. But maybe I'm just biased because, once again, I was like 11 or 12 when I saw the first one. I was like 14 or 15 when I saw the second one. I was at the perfect impressionable age.
Yeah.
It's hard to hit me like a sledgehammer to the head.
Yeah, I just tried to watch Hellraiser the original recently, and I'm like, yeah, this is terrible. It didn't hold up. It's just, you see something 30 years later or 15 years later or 10 years and you're like, yeah, this is not, I'm not the same person, or this, it's just not as good. I like the idea that Riley made that choice that she did. Which was, what was it called? Lament. She chose the lament configuration. And I was like, oh, that's fucking clever. I thought it was a good script. Again, not the best thing I've ever seen, but it held my attention, and surprisingly so, in a day and age where I expect nothing just about every time I sit down. I was pleasantly surprised.
Well, if you and I ever reach a point where we can't watch any show or movie, we'll just devote ourselves full time to MMA, because I feel like at a time where film and television so often disappoints, and once again, my first and only love is always movies, because in the 90s, it was just a very easy time to fall in love with movies. Yeah. But I'm not going to sit around and waste my entire life watching a bunch of shows and flicks that fucking suck, especially when video games like Elden Ring are so goddamn good, or MMA is so goddamn good, or there's so many authors out there who I like as well. Like, there's so much competition now. Yeah. I will cut and run if I get to the point where nothing's appealing to me. And once again, I always try to figure out, or be honest, like, am I not liking it just because it's for a different generation, or am I not liking it because it fucking sucks? Yeah. And I guess, like, you and I, we've earned our opinions the hard way over time. But man, if you have a channel devoted to film and television commentary, it's hard to find reasons to really get super fired up. But every once in a while, there's something that comes along, like HBO, a show like Succession or whatever. So there is still good shit out there, but you got to look long and hard to find it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this show has done a lot, but it's worked off the back catalog. So we could be talking about a Hammer film. In a couple of weeks, we're going to look at, I'm trying to set up something next week with Cinema Cities.
I'm surprised somebody hasn't dusted off Hammer horror in a big way, like make Hammer horror dive. As big a brand as like Marvel or Star Trek or Star Wars or whatever, because that kind of Hammer horror, romantic, kind of late 1800s, dark and stormy nights up in castles with people all dressed up. That is a certain flavor of horror that some people really respond to, but for whatever reason, it hasn't been dusted off and resurrected.
It's just sitting there. I mean, and it's not even romantic. That's hypersexual.
Oh yeah, it's all about the cleavage, baby.
The women in fucking Hammer, man, they were the femme fatales, bro, and just the cleavage, and you just don't stand a chance. She's breathing heavy, and she's right there on your neck, and you're like, fuck, all right, I guess you got me. There's nothing I can do here.
Exactly.
You get these stiff British guys, and these hypersexual women, and you're like, yeah, that guy doesn't have a fucking chance.
Yep. He's going down.
Over. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, we're going to be looking at RKO. I'd like to do a couple movies on the old RKO horror that happened simultaneously at the same time.
All the old like Val Lewton films.
Yeah. Cat
he was
people,
great.
Curse of the Cat People. Yeah, I mean, because they would just throw him fucking lemons, and he would just throw lemonade back at him every time.
And he had directors like Jacques Tourneur working for him. But that whole period in the 40s, horror in the 40s, Universal kind of started to just veer into like comedy. But at RKO, they were doing some really cool stuff, like I Walk with
intellectual,
a Zombie.
And some avant shit, man.
Yeah, that was a really good era for horror, or at least for that particular style, where through shadow and suggestion you imply the horror. And I'm a big fan of Val Lewton and all that whole period.
The pool scene in Cat People.
Oh yeah, it's great. I like it in the remake as well, when you get to see Annette O'Toole's tatas, but the original Cat People and the remake of Cat People as a double feature, because everything that's implied in the Jacques Tourneur classic is shown in the remake. A rare remake that was worthy of mentioning in the same breath as the original film.
Yeah, and that was Nastasia's big. That was probably her biggest production.
Yeah, she was great in it. Yeah,
she was.
Good Sergio, a great Giorgio Moroder score, and I'm a fan. I love it when horror gets really erotic. I like when it's a big turn on, and I think that's always overlooked. Maybe just because I grew up in the 80s when there's a lot of nudity in horror, where I always say it's like chocolate and peanut butter. Sex and horror go together really well. We were talking about Monica Bellucci earlier in the Bram Stoker Dracula. And I feel like too often it gets overlooked just how effective that eroticism can be, where a turn on followed by a bucket of ice water poured in your lap.
Yeah.
It's a very effective kind of bait and switch that should be used more often.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I think people are so timid about any sort of sex nowadays in almost any genre.
Yeah.
When's the last time you've seen a nude scene?
It's not even in I mean, House of the Dragon is the world of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
If Game of Thrones can't even give you a sex scene, like look at early Game of
Yeah.
Thrones, you're like, whoa, this is one step short of just being softcore porn, but like I like it, bring it on. But there's almost none now. So yeah, we're just living in a very weird time where sex is a big no-no.
Yeah, because nobody wants to step on the grenade. I had a guy on the show, Spider Dabrowski, and he was a screenwriter and had his first film made by Tubi called Teardrop. And he had an old school 80s teenage sex trope going on in the movie. And I told him how fucking brave that was. And he goes, I was surprised, but because it was a smaller production house like Tubi, they could get away with it. They were, a little more bold. But it was a Tubi original movie. And if you ever get a chance, it's called Teardrop.
Gotcha.
But I mean, he had old school teenage sex tropes going on. And I'm like, am I fucking watching this? I'm like, is this from this year? Holy shit. But yeah, everything's so fucking risk averse.
Yeah, I remember even as like a little kid, like 9 or 10, like watching Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter.
Better you than me.
Yeah, and there's a big skinny dipping sequence, which at that age, you're looking at like 18-year-old, like high school kids, just thinking like, oh my God, when I'm 18, I want to go to parties like this. And it was so exciting and verboten and that sort of thing. And yeah, people forget just how exciting it is for a younger person when they're looking at the older teenagers, like wanting to get to party like they do, even if you're going to get hacked to pieces by Jason Voorhees and that sort of thing. So
yeah, I don't remember going to any parties that happened like anything I saw in those old 80s movies.
Sadly,
I was so
my first skinny dipping party that I attended, sadly, started out great, but by the time we got to the ocean, to the water, it was nothing but dudes because the girls kept backing up, picking out. I'm like, wait a second. I was like, this sounded like a great idea when somebody made the pitch, but as we were like running towards the ocean, as more and more people started bailing and chickening out, and so yeah, it was less fun than I'd hoped.
Expectation versus reality.
Exactly.
Happens every time. Okay, so is there any point that we haven't made on either film that you'd like to? Because I do this thing and I ask that particular question and then I get into a rating, like a 0
I'll
to
just
5.
say, when in doubt, go back to the source. If you're curious about Werewolf by Night, go back to the 1970s. Check out those original comics. If you're curious about Hellraiser, check out Hellbound Heart. The closer you can get to the source with any cool idea, the more likely you are to discover the ingredients that make it cool and original in the first place. And so, yeah, just go back to the source when in doubt.
I'm surprised how many horror fans don't talk more about horror books and horror authors.
I've got a bunch of them on the rack behind me. I love horror fiction.
Yeah, I just picked up a nice edition of Dennis Wheatley's "The Devil Rides Out," which was just turned into a great fucking film with Christopher Lee. But I think Clive Barker. When people think of Barker, they think of the films. A lot of people, at least the people that I've seen on social media in terms of content creation, because it's a visual medium.
Yeah.
So okay, that's what translates better than necessarily discussing a book. But those Barker books are frightening, man.
Yeah, Damnation Game.
Early books.
Yeah, Damnation Game was excellent.
Yeah, and I can't remember the name of the book that because we had covered Candyman, and the original Candyman is just I think that's actually Barker's best.
Yeah, it's a good one.
With Tony Todd, Virginia Madsen. It's so fucking good.
It's a classic.
Yeah. But I mean, the book that I can't remember the name of the title is that Lord of Illusions was based on with the Harry D'Amour, the recurring Harry D'Amour character. And that was like one of the most frightening things I've ever read. I'm like, holy shit. I'm reading this. It's just a short story. It scares the living shit out of me.
Yeah, it's based on a story called The Last Illusion.
That's it. Yeah, The Last Illusion. Yeah, The Last Illusion.
Yeah, no, Clive Barker, he's the real deal. He was in his day. Holy shit, he wrote a lot of
sick bastard.
Yeah,
sick bastard. Hold on a second. I've got a couple more comments. The Monsters was fine. It took a couple of watches.
I don't got a couple of watches in me.
Yeah, I might have one watch. I might. It was a PG-rated prequel directed by Zombie. You kind of know what to expect. Nothing spectacular. Great stream tonight. James was a great guest, of course he was.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, Candyman was based on The Forbidden, which was really good. Scarlet Gospels. That's a fantastic Clive Barker.
Gotcha.
That's the end of Pinhead. That's the end of where he decides he's going to take over hell. He's going to challenge, like Lucifer has just, it's almost like the Neil Gaiman thing where he just doesn't want to run it anymore.
Gotcha.
So no one's seen him in forever. So Pinhead thinks he's going to just step in and take the empty seat, and doesn't quite turn out the way he thinks.
I will check it out.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, every time October rolls around, I always try to kind of soak up some great horror fiction. And so, yeah, I'll definitely hunt that down.
All right. Okay, so here's the part where we get to the rating of the particular films. We have a rating system of 0 to 5, and we have half scores. So you can go 0, 0.5, 1, 1.5, all the way to 5. Now, 0, let's say that equals I'm up to my neck in vomit and somebody throws a bucket of snot at me, and I'd rather have that happen than watch this movie again. To 5. Which is, in your case, a big sadomasochistic party, the thing of all time. And, I'm at some sort of serial killer convention, so, that's
cannibal convention.
Yeah, cannibal convention. But, like 5 is like, okay, this is the destination. This is what, I cover film for. This is why I'm here to talk about films. Like
Hall of Fame.
Yeah, Hall of Fame kind of thing. I think, okay, well, let's do them both. Give me your rating for Werewolf by Night and then your rating for Hellraiser.
On a scale of vomit to Hall of Fame, I'd probably give Werewolf by Night a 2.5. It doesn't make me want to vomit, but it doesn't make me want to put it in the Hall of Fame. It's got some interesting performances, some interesting ideas, some interesting moments, some interesting ingredients, but it's yet another sign that Marvel is having a bit of an identity crisis and can't quite figure out what they want the brand to be. And so I'm glad I saw it. I'm glad I at least have an informed opinion about it, but it didn't necessarily blow my hair back.
And Hellraiser?
Hellraiser, I would go to a 3 because I did like Jamie Clayton. And I like that world, and I want to see more from that world. And I'll take a bad Hellraiser movie over a bad something in another genre. I think I like the movie a little less than you did, but I did enjoy it. It didn't give me either the horror or sexual ingredients that I crave. And something called Hellraiser, it needed to put some hooks in my eyeballs and pull them out. It needed to really give me something that I thought was lacking, but I thought it was the stronger of the two.
Okay. All right. For me, with Werewolf by Night, I would go with a 2. I like Gael Garcia. I don't like horror comedies, but with the script that he had, he was okay. And I like his presence on the screen. He's got charisma. I like the woman who played Elsa Bloodstone.
Yeah,
Elsa Bloodstone. I liked her character as well. So I will give them each a point. Together, that makes 2 points. But otherwise, I could have lived without this whole thing. If they had not done it, I would have been happy. If you had a choice between let's watch this and I'll give it a 2 or not do it at all, I'd say not do it at all. Don't do it. Don't do it. Just leave it alone. It's like Baron Zemo. Like, don't bring Baron Zemo back right now. I like where they've left him right
I wish
now.
Disney would just leave everything alone. I wish they would just take their hands off of any property that I've ever liked.
If this is complete, again, like we've talked about unrealistic things, if after Endgame, they had just taken like 5 years off and then slowly start to reboot and get your Fantastic Four going. Take 5 years off, develop your Fantastic Four, develop your X-Men. Start to bring these characters, a whole other universe. Start to flow in your old characters that are still left over from the first 3 phases. That would have been optimal and told people that you give a shit. Instead, they went in the exact opposite direction, and now they belt out something every 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah,
they flooded the market with subpar content, and I don't think the brand will ever recover.
No, neither do I. Especially when you see that they have 2 more phases of the same shit. They're not going to survive 3.
No, they're going to run it into the ground.
Yes.
And they will only stop making it when people throw up their hands in disgust and say, enough.
Yeah.
I'm watching
And
anything as long as it's not Marvel.
Scorsese was right.
Yeah. I think we should make some T-shirts and baseball caps and just say Scorsese was right.
Scorsese was right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I would give that a 2. In terms of Hellraiser, I give it a 3.5.
Gotcha. All right.
I'll give it a 3.5. I expected nothing. I got something. It had enough sadomasochism for me, which was brief. It was graphic. I don't like movies like Hostel. Like I haven't seen it. I'm not going to see it. I've kind of wanted to watch that one, Ichi the Killer, Takashi Miki's.
It's great. Ichi the Killer.
It's supposed to be extremely graphic, though.
Yeah. Like, I mean, graphic doesn't even begin to cover it. If you ever want to do another one of these live streams about Ichi the Killer, I'll play.
Okay. Ichi the Killer. All right, we'll take. I think it's on one of my local channels. I have to figure out which one.
I mean, it's fucking insane. Like the torture and the violence.
Takashi Miike.
Yeah, he's really good. That's one of his better movies, but the violence is horrific.
Yeah. I saw the one where he's got the man
people's
suspended.
nipples out over blocks of ice and taking a razor and chopping the tips off and things like that. Like
I've seen where he's got the guy. He got the Yakuza boss suspended from the tendril hooks,
from
Man Called Horse.
Yeah,
that kind of thing. He's got that kind of shit going on. That guy goes for it though, man.
Oh yeah,
he's
good.
His 13 Assassins remake is one of the greatest remakes of all time. As far
and
as I'm
Audition was a ton of fun, or I say fun.
Yeah.
Audition was a wild, intense experience. But yeah, he's made like 90 movies, so not all of them are equally good. But every once in a while, he makes one. You're like, whoa, yeah. So Ichi, yeah.
Hold on, Pinhead meets Harry D'Amour from Lord of Illusions and the Scarlet Gospels. That's what got me interested.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's what happens. I love my ever-changing. Every time I've got a different zero. Zero is described in a different way. You pay to watch Mike watch each of the.
Are there? All right, let me ask you a question. Are there any Marvel shows or movies that have been made since 2008 that you would give a 0?
I haven't watched one of their. No, that's not true because I did watch Morbius. I only watched Morbius and Doctor Strange because I'm doing this. I didn't watch theatrical releases, and I only watched them to cover on this show. 0, no.
Gotcha.
I wouldn't give Morbius a 0. I think I gave Morbius 1.5 or 2 because Matt Smith stole every scene. He even stole it from Jared Harris.
Right. He's wildly talented.
Smith.
And Matt Smith is the best part of House of the Dragon. Matt Smith is just killing it.
Well, I don't know. Patty Constantine. I mean,
he was really good as well. Yeah, he got to go out on a high note in a big way.
Yeah. Holy shit. Yeah. But yeah, I didn't give that. I think I gave Doctor Strange 2 or 2.5 because the strength of the visuals is clearly all Raimi, and everything else is fucking Marvel Studios.
What have you given a 5 on this show?
Joker.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Joker, Todd Phillips, Joker. The rating system is within the past 10 or 15 movies, and usually I'm somewhere in the 3 to 4. So I don't cover movies, consistently just to shit on them like you talked about. I've done, there's 143. I'd say 135 of them I love. But yeah, now with the rating system, and now that I'm looking at a little more relevant content. So I'm not necessarily, leaning into the back catalog. I'm making some pre-recorded stuff now. You want some newer things to look at. So there's more chance to run into things you don't enjoy. So yeah, I got a 2 here. But 3.5, yeah, I liked Riley. I liked the female, who played the priest. Yeah, it was a good flick. It was a good flick. And if they made more with a decent story and a decent director, if Bruckner decided that he wanted to take on a couple of Hellraiser movies, yeah, I'll, sign me up.
Yeah, I will. If they come back, I'll come back. Whereas there are some franchises like Star Trek where I don't know if I'll ever watch another episode of Star Trek or another movie of Star Trek ever again, where they've run it so badly into the ground where I can't even watch old Star Trek now because the new Star Trek is so horrible. It's completely tainted my overall impression. And so I would say that in terms of these franchises that some of which have outlived their usefulness, but some of which they keep bringing back,
Yeah.
I will keep coming back for more Hellraisers, even though I wish they would just make more original
News.
franchises.
Yeah.
But we'll see what the future might hold. But the good news is because horror is making money right now, we're gonna get a shitload of horror over the next couple of years. And if
Yeah.
you're making a lot of it, just by the law of averages, some of it's gonna punch through and be good.
Yeah. Even A24 has
Yeah.
delved
They make
into
some of the best horror. They do a good job.
Have you seen The Black Coat's Daughter?
I don't think I have. What's it called?
The Black Coat's Daughter. Holy shit.
I don't think I've even heard of it. It's an A24 film?
Yeah. Holy shit.
Black Coat Daughter.
The Black Coat's Daughter.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I have no knowledge. Oh, 2015. Somehow I haven't even fucking heard of it.
Black Coat's Daughter. I mean, you've got Ari Aster making films.
I like Ari Aster quite a bit.
Yeah, same here. Hereditary's just because it became an instant goat for me.
Yeah, no, it's a special movie.
Oh God, who just did Robert Eggers?
Yeah, he's good too.
Eggers, what he's doing.
Yeah. There's definitely some talented young filmmakers out there who are giving us a reason to remain enthused about film and television. You just gotta know where to look.
Yeah, you gotta look for it nowadays, and I don't mind. So I think I'm going to start a new recommends kind of sub-thread of things. I recommend this. American Werewolf recommends this, that, probably. I think I'm working on Possessor right now.
Who would you hire? Who would you tap to be the director if somebody wanted to finally make a really good MMA movie? Because I feel like they make them. There are a lot of aging MMA or retired MMA athletes who make kind of Z-grade action movies, and so they get made. But we haven't had that like quintessential MMA masterpiece, unless you like certain documentaries like Choke about like Hickson Gracie and things like that, which is a really cool doc. But we haven't had that great MMA movie yet. But at least we haven't had a movie that's as exciting and entertaining as a really good fight card. That's what I always say. If you can't make a movie that's as good as, if not better than a fight card, well, what are we doing here? So who would you hire to make a great MMA movie?
I don't know. That's a great question. The Russos, maybe?
But man, Gray Man kind of sucked, and I think the Russos, maybe their best.
I never saw Gray Man.
Well.
Yeah, was it? Bad?
I mean, I'd read the book.
I didn't have any interest.
Yeah, it kind of sucked. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think the Russos might be over.
I don't know. I haven't thought of an old school like where those genres are dead. Martial arts films are dead.
Well, all the time in the 90s, I would watch so many martial arts movies like Jackie Chan, whatever. But all the time that I used to spend watching martial arts movies, I now spend either watching MMA or listening to MMA commentary. And I got a couple of hours a week of great content. I'm like, all right, all my love of action now is being funneled into that space.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, as we watch Seagal and we watch Van Damme and we watch, Jackie Chan, the old Rumble in the Bronx. Bronx heydays and Super Cop and all the and then he finally makes it big with Rush Hour. He makes it big 5-star American movie. And then they got it perfect for about 10 years with Crouching Tiger. We find out who Ang Lee is, and then they start making movies like Hero and House of Flying Daggers and all these those beautiful run shows but with a story.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is like perfection. And then CGI came along.
Yeah, Donnie Yen versus Jet Li and Hero. It's like, holy cow, that's a good scene.
Just that initial scene where he goes running towards Donnie Yen in slow motion, and Donnie Yen just understands instantly, like, holy shit, who is this guy?
Yeah.
But then CGI came along, and suddenly Keanu Reeves could be the one. And it just sort of clipped the wings of, and we had Ip Man.
Yeah, I'd like to see a filmmaker, a really great filmmaker who's not like a fan of MMA, but make a movie about like what is life like for these guys after the
Wrestler?
Like the fighting is over, but they're still doing like, if you made a movie like The Wrestler, but about like somebody like in their late 40s who's like popping up in like movies and shows and like they're still kind of like getting work, but they're struggling. I feel like there is a movie like The Wrestler to be made about what happens to fighters when their contracts expire.
It could start Chuck Liddell. He could play himself.
Yeah, or someone like Michael Bisping who is like missing an eye and like missing his knees, but he's like, he's doing YouTube videos and he's doing commentary. But like, what is the life like for an aging fighter and all the injuries that they wrestle with? I feel like there's a great drama to be made there.
Yeah, well, Bisping's one of. I mean, the film aside, I'm lost as to who would be a. I don't even, action directors. I don't even know.
Yeah, get
but
Robert
I mean,
Eggers. Yeah,
yeah, Bisping is a goat though.
yeah. I watch his YouTube channel.
I don't watch his YouTube channel, but I mean, I watch his commentary. I saw him on Rogan when he did 3 hours, and he just talked about how he fought all those times with one eye.
Or that story he tells about like how he's a sleepwalker, but like he tried to climb over some wall, buck ass naked.
And his wife comes out and she's like, "What the fuck are you doing?"
Oh, I was howling. So goddamn funny.
Yeah. I mean, but I mean, you've got also the tragic stories of people like Wanderlei Silva.
Yeah.
Clearly suffering from CTE now at this stage.
Yeah.
And these guys who didn't make any money in the beginning.
There's
Don Fry.
There's so much dramatic. Oh, I love Don Fry, the Predator, but there's so much great dramatic potential there, and I feel like this is yet another example of where film and television perhaps have lost a step, or we're so emotionally invested in these stories that we understand through these interviews and through the behind the scenes documentaries and through the fights. Like these narratives are riveting and they're so much fun to follow. And it's like, can you make a movie that's as fun to follow as the narratives we're already experiencing in real time?
You know who would make a movie like that? And this is actually giving it some time. Clint Eastwood.
Oh yeah,
Clint Eastwood would direct a movie like $1 Million Baby.
Yeah, but he's 91 years old. I mean, I don't know how many more movies he's going to make.
As far hopefully forever. I would love to see another 10 years. Here's the onion. You don't have an audience, or you have a very limited audience. It's like The Northman. Nobody went to see it.
Yeah.
There's no CGI. And then, people, came out and, it got political and people said that it's racist.
Yeah, it's a weird thing.
You haven't gotten into, you haven't got the mentality. The wave hasn't broken completely yet to where you have the hunger or the vacuum, that can, where a movie like that can fill the hole.
It'd have to be a streaming show. Like the way people talk about streaming shows today, so like in the 90s, people would talk about like cool flicks they'd seen recently or great books they'd read. I never hear anybody talk about cool books or cool movies anymore.
No.
But everybody from all walks of life, from every background imaginable, they all have a show that they like. And that is the new bestseller mixed with cool flick you see in the theater. And so sadly, if you're going to do something great, it probably has to be done for somebody like HBO or Netflix, but it has to be done as a streaming. And that might change in 10 years, but right now that's where all the momentum is.
I think that bubble's about to burst too, because the subscriber numbers aren't what these companies need them to be anymore. And they've just been spending and spending and spending and spending.
Full throttle.
And spending. Yeah.
Full throttle.
Pedal to the metal, and just money just going out the window, and now it's not coming back in. And you see what Zaslav's doing over there at Warner Brothers, slashing.
Yeah.
Slashing. He'd probably cut Black Adam if it wasn't The Rock, but The Rock's too big to cut.
I'll be seeing that next Thursday. I've got my ticket.
Did you really? Okay, because my understanding is that his the viewing number had tested lower than Batwoman.
Ooh.
Yeah, it tested lower than Batwoman, but you can't cancel The Rock.
Yeah, you can't cancel The Rock. And I like a lot of those characters. So once again, like I complain about all this shit, but I still end up going. But like I'll be there Thursday, 3:00 next Thursday at the Alamo Draft House watching Black Adam. So fingers crossed, The Rock delivers.
The thing that people don't understand is that we complain about these fucking things because we give a shit.
Yeah.
And because we want them to be good. I've got better things to do. I'd love to sit here and say, wow, did you see that fucking episode of the Kenobi? Holy shit, that was fire.
Sadly, I did see those episodes of Kenobi.
So did I.
And they fucking sucked balls. I
they
hated
did.
That shit.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. But you got the same fucking people who line up every 6 weeks for another Disney shit burger, with all the toppings. And, you're like, this sucks. Like, what the fuck?
Kenobi broke me. Kenobi really broke me.
Yeah. It was fucking awful. It was fucking, and that was where I really started to get into the YouTube commentary.
Oh yeah,
of people who would
the
just go
commentary is
on
more
and rip
entertaining.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You would need that to salve the fucking wound, of having watched this. Hold on. He says, I'll check out the Black Coat's Daughter, Mike battling 1,000. Yeah, I keep recommending movies to Eric, and so far every single one he's like, holy shit, that was fantastic.
Nice. All right.
Oh, he just bought The Devil's Candy on Blu-ray. Awesome. Devil's Candy's fucking phenomenal. Love Don Fry. Yeah.
Oh, the way he talks and that voice of his, and yeah, Don the Predator. When he was on Joe Rogan like a year or two ago, and he was still talk, even though he can barely even move. Still talking about how he thinks he can take any of the current heavyweight. He's like talking about how he wants to fight Francis Ngannou. I was like, are you out of your goddamn mind?
Please stop. Please don't. Yeah.
But that's why he's the Predator. But yeah. Fascinating.
He's got that. He does a podcast with Dan Severn.
Nice. Yeah,
I think it's called Toxic Masculinity.
Oh, legends. Both of them are legends.
Yeah.
Dan Severn with those his black diaper that he used to wear, just like the trunk, old school trunks. But yeah, anyway, all those early UFCs, I had them all on VHS for a while, and yeah, I was a big fan of all those guys.
That's the thing about UFC though; it's fucking expensive. It's an expensive fucking passion. $75 a pay-per-view.
Yeah, you gotta have ESPN Plus and the pay-per-views, but goddamn, I get so much satisfaction when you're watching a like Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman, when it suddenly ends with that kick to the face. Yeah, that's more exciting than any fucking action movie you're going to see in 2022.
Or Nunes versus Pena too.
Yeah.
Holy shit!
It's pure dynamite. I fucking love that sport.
Yeah. Because boxing has become, I don't know what Tyson Fury. Really?
Yeah, I get I'm a casual with boxing. I get the occasional pay-per-view, but I watch a lot of MMA. I watch a little bit of boxing.
When I saw Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, I'm like, what the fuck is this? It looked like, I don't know what it looked like, but I mean, there's like a 40-pound weight difference between Wilder and Fury.
They fought 3 times?
Something like that. Yeah,
I think they fought 3 times. Yeah, I think I saw 2. I think I saw 2 of them. I didn't see the most recent one.
How do you fight somebody with a 40-pound weight difference? What the fuck?
Yeah, well, when Tyson retires, he's going to have a 200-pound weight difference with people. He's going to get big. You can just tell that guy's got giant. He's going to pull like a Daniel
fat
Cormier.
Bastard. He's going to be like fat bastard. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, you and I will have to circle back and find some martial arts and combat topics, and when it comes to cinema, because while it's always more fun to talk about the sport, but I'm always looking for great excuses to kind of backdoor my way into MMA discussions through action movies. So maybe like the next John Wick film or something like that.
That's always something to look forward to. And who would have thought, that would make it to 4 movies and then you'd be dying. Because on its face, it's like the most brain dead fucking thing. But at the same time, it's fucking fantastic.
Yeah, I enjoy them.
All of them on Blu-ray. Yeah. I'll watch any of them anytime, I don't want to watch the edited versions on TNT. Give me the full thing. So I don't know. Maybe we'll come back for a martial arts flick or something.
Yeah, like John Wick 4 or something like that. But sign me up. But I've enjoyed the hell out of talking to you. I'm glad we finally got a chance to shoot the shit. And I apologize for how difficult I was to lock down, but I'm thrilled that we finally got a chance to shoot the shit about some flicks.
Yeah, this went longer than I thought it was going to. We're coming up on 2 hours, and I know that this was about twice as long as we thought it was going to go. But
I'm sure your movie fan audience members are like, why are they talking about MMA the whole time? But all roads lead to MMA.
Indeed. It's like 6 degrees of separation. So we're going to be okay. And if not, then they can,
especially when a lot of them are jumping in. You see George St. Pierre and Captain America Winter Soldier. Like, all right, fuck yeah, GSP. Like, bring it on. I love seeing MMA athletes popping up in flicks. So I know like Conor McGregor's, I think he's going to be in the remake of Roadhouse. I'm sure it'll be a total piece of shit, but I like seeing those two worlds.
I love Conor McGregor. I know a lot of people think he's a scumbag and a monster, but I fucking
I think it's possible to recognize he's a scumbag and a monster and still like to watch his fights all at the same time. Yeah. I was there I was there when he beat Eddie Alvarez in 2016 at MSG.
Oh, were you really?
Yeah, that was a big night. I had the second shittiest seat in the entire stadium. I was like at the very top, but I was like, I'm not missing this fight. And so, I was there. Yeah.
Donald Cerrone has gone into he just did that movie with Gina Carano.
Absolutely.
For Daily Wire. So
and he pops up. He's actually popped up in quite a few flicks. What the hell is he in? He was also in Terminalist with the Chris Pratt show on Amazon.
That's
He's one of the
right.
villains
And
who fights at the end.
who is just was in Cobra Kai?
Oh,
Who fought Logan Paul? Tyrone Woodley.
He fought Jake Paul.
Jake Paul.
Okay.
Okay. Tyrone Woodley was one of the evil senseis in Cobra Kai.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, God bless you, man. God bless you. You know, just
that shows you the good sport, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I love it when he was fighting Jake Paul. His sponsor for the fight, across his butt, it just said "Dude Wipes." That was his official sponsor for the fight. I was like, that's a little gross, but you're gonna sell a lot of Dude Wipes wearing that logo across your butt.
Just make your money, man. Make your money. Now he's on Cobra Kai. So it's all good.
Bring it on. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think this is as good a place as any to bring this to a close, like we were talking about. My thanks to James Hancock. And James, I'm going to put the link to your show in the description. Tell people where they can find your content.
You can find me on Twitter at Geekin Out, or my YouTube channel, Geekin with James Hancock. And I also have a podcast called Wrong Reel, where we tackle giant film history topics. My YouTube channel is more about what's new, and Wrong Reel is more about what's old. And they're not hard and fast rules, but in general, if you want to hear me talking to guests about old school movies, check out Wrong Reel. Or if you want to hear me talk about House of the Dragon or something like that, check out Geekin with James Hancock.
You got anything coming up? I guess the end of Rings of Power.
Yeah, season finale of the Rings of Power on Thursday, and I think I'm gonna do a mid-season review of Andor tomorrow. If the episode's good, then I'll do a mid-season review. And Black Adam next Thursday, and and of course more House of the Dragon over the next 2 weekends. So I try to have like 2 or 3 videos per week, so there's always something new.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm glad we were finally able to do this.
Hell yeah.
Very cool.
Thanks again for the invite.
Yeah. We'll have to connect back up again and find some good stuff to talk about. It's been a good conversation, and I've appreciated having you on. Thanks, man.
Yeah, well, I've enjoyed the hell of it. I will see you around the Twitterverse.
Sounds good. Everybody, I'll see you guys in the next video. I'll be putting out the recommends in terms of The Possessor, or in terms of Possessor, Cronenberg's The Possessor. And then next week, I'm going to try to get out the RKO double feature with Cat People and Curse of the Cat People with Sydney from Cinema Cities.
Very cool.
All the best, everybody, for a great evening. And thanks so much.
Excellent.